Thanks for tuning in. The show you're about to listen to was recorded literally hours before the McMichaels in Brunswick were arrested and before the Dow salon owner was released. Please enjoy the show.
You're listening to Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong, all on Georgia Radio Network.
Welcome to episode 116 of the Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong podcast. I'm Dave Roberts. With me is my podcast partner in crime, writer, journalist, blogger, Jessica Salaji.
Hey. Podcast.
How are your quarantine activities week 9?
Fine. I did some more furniture moving. Started back at local governments a little bit, like 2 entities started meeting in person, which was exciting. One of them met out at a gazebo at a rec department, and it was before we had a little freeze, or I guess it was not a freeze, but a cold front, and it was 90 degrees at 6:30. And we were just sitting outside, 6 feet apart in the heat. So, what about you?
Was anybody in a seersucker suit?
No, thank God. Everybody definitely
Lord.
Yeah, no.
Sorry.
Mm-mm. I would have in a bow tie. No. You're adults. But everybody did dress down because, I mean, it doesn't really feel like a meeting. It doesn't matter if you bring the nameplates and have your clerk and everything else. It just doesn't feel like a meeting when you're sitting under a gazebo at a rec department.
Well, at least they're handling business.
Yeah, I honestly...
I don't know what business.
It was Evans County, and so I did appreciate, like, it wasn't a long meeting. There were a couple things that they had to do, but I appreciated that they had the meeting anyway because they gave the last 45 days update of all the things that they've spent money on that were not traditional expenses, so that it could be public and transparent. And so, I mean, I'll give them props for that.
Yeah, having meetings when the inside and then telling the public they can't attend because you can't be 6 feet away from each other in the chambers is a problem.
Right.
I actually got a email about the zoning board that I sit on, and they asked if I would come. I said yeah, it's fine. And then they came back and said, no, it's canceled. The courthouse is closed until the 14th. We'll reconvene in June. But these are applications that no one could do anything with because we're not meeting. So if you're sitting waiting to break ground on something, or a lot of times with the zoning board of appeals, we're holding up a real estate transaction because you're not going to buy the property unless you can get the zoning for whatever business you want to pop up on it. So it's my unconstitutional board has not been able to meet. So we actually have to have like a real meeting because normally I'm there for like 10 minutes. Motion to approve, and it's one case. Now we're probably going to have a slew of cases in June.
Sure. Well, yeah. I guess we're going to get to that. I kind of jumped the gun, but I was talking about going to go on to backlogs of everything that's happening because in every level of government, there's backlogs. The courts are just, I'll save it. You go.
You'll save it?
I'll save it.
And I guess it's fairly quiet except for national media outlets hollering about Georgia businesses refused to open.
Yeah, what the heck? I mean, the coverage that Kemp has been getting is just, I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but it's almost like because we were first on so many things, like a lot of other states are looking to what we did and how they're reopening because we were leading the charge there, but I can't stand the headlines that say, 150 businesses are refusing to open under Kemp's order. He didn't order them to do anything. They can't refuse something they're not required to do. It just drives me nuts.
Right. Look, the barbershop I normally go to is still closed, and I still need a haircut. As my wife pointed out, luckily I keep my hair so short that it's not ridiculous at this point. But I'm not holding it against them. It's not even a refusal. A lot of this is they can't afford to open. They the place I go, I guarantee you the folks that cut my hair don't make $900 a week cutting hair, but they do it on unemployment. So for a lot of these folks, for a lot of these businesses, it's not a refusal or even not a lack of desire. It's they can't find the people to work. Or it's like the sub shop I mentioned last week, which was, you can't distance. He's going to stay takeout only because his place is so small. You can't responsibly distance. That's him as a business owner making a big boy decision.
Right.
So that's, yeah, I don't like the refuse to open. Is they made a business decision that's not advantageous for them to open at this point, or that they can't properly operate at this point due to lack of staff.
Yes, and it just speaks to this narrative of everyone saying, Kemp's making people open. We're not ready to open. Well, great. You don't have to. Just like you don't have to leave the house.
Right. Yeah. Feel free to shelter in place for as long as you feel it's necessary for your health. I've got a friend who yanked his kids out of school early because of this, because he saw it coming. He's also a guy that when it was snowing, told his kids, "You're not going to school today. The weather's going to be bad." Didn't wait for the government, didn't wait for the superintendent to say, "Okay, we're closing the school." He said, "I don't think it's safe for you to go. You guys are not going to school today." Because he made an adult big boy decision.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a quick update on the Dow salon owner.
Boy, do we.
Oh, yeah. So Shelley Luther, who I mentioned in my closing thought last week, has been arrested for operating her salon, Salon a la Mode. She went before an activist judge who is apparently likes the limelight a little too much, and sentenced her to 7 days in lockup. Read her for filth for endangering the putting her needs above those of the community around her. And God bless this woman, she didn't back down. She says, it's not selfish for me to want to feed my kids.
That's right.
So apparently Texas has got Attorney General Ken Paxton called for the immediate release. So apparently an Attorney General can act on behalf of the people when a court is out of line. Called for her immediate release, especially considering that as of last Friday, the stay-at-home order was being lifted in Texas. The lieutenant governor offered to pay her $7,000 fine. There's a GoFundMe to pay her legal fine and fees. So as we record this, I believe she's still in jail. But this is as close to a Rosa Parks as you're going to see. She wasn't trying to be a hero. She just refused to obey an illegal, unjust order based on the government.
Well, and it's not like, and I'm certainly not defending the sheriff in this case, but there was another sheriff, what was it, Ector County, I think, in Texas as well. And it was a bar. They used the SWAT team to raid the bar because they were trying to reopen it, and there were a bunch of people there. And I'm not saying that they were wrong, because the community showed up to help support the bar owner, and it turned into a big cluster. But unlike theirs, which was highly publicized and clearly a movement, this woman was literally just trying to work. She wasn't trying to. It just happened. It just, I don't know.
Yeah. There's an appetite to have your hair done, and there's a service provider willing to do it. And the people want to have their hair done and willing to pay money to a person who provides a service. I mean, everybody understands what's going on. She's taking her own risk with her safety, and the customers are taking their own risk. And as minor as I think the risk is, in order to trade money for a service. It was absurd to begin with. The fine was absurd. She is going to make herself famous. And when this is all said and done, I think her appointment book will be full.
You think she'll run for office?
I don't know if that's her goal or not.
I know, but you see sometimes where these people are open, their eyes are open to the system and they get so much support. I mean, she's perfectly poised right now to, even if she just wanted to run for state house or sheriff or something.
She's very well spoken, very comfortable in front of the cameras, poised, well put together, and not shaken by a guy in a robe shaking his finger at her. I mean, she's got the basics. What all these folks don't understand when they run for office is often how dirty it gets, and I have no idea her background. I have no idea her other politics. She may be a anti-Second Amendment. She could oppose everything else about what I support, which is fine. I mean, that's her right. But on this one issue, it's more complicated running for office, I think. But yeah, people do use Lucy McBath notoriety to gain office. Lucy McBath, even if they don't live in the state. Lucy McBath.
Lord.
So, military not accepting new recruits who've recovered from COVID-19. A memo released from MEPS, the United States Military Entrance Processing Command, that circulating on Twitter states that a history of COVID-19 confirmed by a laboratory test or clinical diagnosis is permanently disqualifying.
What do you think about this? I put this on here because I wanted you to rant about this.
It's absurd, especially when recruiters struggle to hit numbers. You've got people who are willing to serve, want to serve, and this is not something that this is not HIV, and the ban on HIV has a lot to do with the potential to have blood. Battlefields get bloody. And there's not always PPE on hand for rendering aid. This is a gross overreaction. I have to believe now that this is out that it'll be changed. Recruits can apply for waivers for permanent disqualifying conditions, but without further guidance for accepting and dealing with COVID-19, a review authority would not have justification to grant a waiver. So, when I went in the Army, I got a waiver. I'd had one of my shoulder surgeries before, and I had to have, doctors documenting that the shoulder was strong enough to go and do all the stuff that I would have to do. So, medical waivers are done every day. Even at 18, very rarely do you have somebody who is pristine, has never had a surgery, never had anything that they need to look further into. But and you're talking about New York City saying that possibly 25% of the population had it, never knew they had it, have the antibodies. Plus, with this,
yeah, that's exactly it.
How do you get people to? If I wanted to join the Army, I sure as hell wouldn't go down to like Quest Diagnostics is doing an antibody test. You can sign up, and if you think that you may have had it, go find out if you have the antibody. Well, I sure as hell wouldn't do that if I wanted to join the Army. It also encourages young people not to seek medical help. So this is going to disqualify me.
But aren't they testing? Are they testing themselves?
I don't know. I don't know if at MEPS they're running an antibody test. I wouldn't think so. And the reason I say that is the antibody test is so new that I doubt that it's filtered down to because it's not a diagnostic test. It's a retroactive test to let you know if you had it. I don't think so. I wouldn't think so.
I mean,
maybe something they have in the near future.
Yeah. What do you think about the argument that we just don't know enough? We don't know the long-term effects.
You're right. We don't know what we don't know.
We never
But we're
do.
talking about Yeah, we're talking about an organization that gave people anthrax vaccines, only to find out later that it causes psoriasis and some other stuff. Finding out later that there's an effect is not a justification. We don't know that it is. It's fear mongering. In fact, if we do find out that you get an antibody and you can't get that version of COVID again, that would be a good thing force wide. Also, we know that a good population within the military has had it. We going to chapter those guys out? I mean, you're going to ETS everybody who had it? No. Or give somebody a medical discharge for having COVID and having recovered? Of course not. It is hard enough to find young people that want to serve, are capable, physically capable of serving, because we've covered the story before that our youth are fat and out of shape, and it's getting harder and harder to find kids that can even qualify to get in. So we're already having troubles, and then you're going to take this and throw it at them. It's a very much a force minimizing policy, and I would expect that it'll be changed now that it's come to light.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said on this one. I mean, I don't think that I like I said, I wanted you to rant about it, but I think it's going to backfire.
Everything the government does backfires. And we've discovered that with all the response to COVID. The unemployment backfires. You can't get people to go back to work. The PPP backfires because you can't get money to the businesses that actually need it. Everything they do backfires. Just leave it alone. Good God, leave it alone. So, coronavirus has devastated Uber and Lyft's business. Now California is suing them.
Well, I thought this was interesting because we've talked on the show about the lawsuits and the federal rulings, I think from the Department of Labor, or not the rulings, but the actual rules that they issued about whether or not drivers are independent contractors. And then we've talked about it at the state level because with the gun bill that Scott Turner wanted with private property versus when you're, a contractor for Lyft and Uber. But San Diego, Los Angeles, and San Francisco, along with the state attorney general in California, filed a lawsuit against Uber and Lyft, which whenever it starts with them being the plaintiff and they're suing private entities, it just immediately pisses me off. It doesn't matter what it's about. But they're complaining that the companies misclassified their drivers as independent contractors and not employees, which is a violation of the gig economy law. And I guess they're suing on behalf of people who aren't able to get unemployment benefits.
Here's the thing. You work for Uber and Lyft at will. If you were an employee of one of these companies, they would have a schedule for you. And they would tell you, you're going to have to come into work at noon and you get off at 8. And this is your route. That's not what Uber and Lyft is. It is an independent contractor that says, okay, on Tuesday, I've got time between these hours. I'm going to go turn my app on and go pick up some rides. So by every imaginable definition, they're a subcontractor. They typically work for more than one person. Most drivers work for Uber and Lyft. And a lot of them have another full-time job. So by definition, everything says they're a subcontractor. Now, when you pay an employee as a subcontractor and you're treating him like an employee, he wears your uniform shirt, he drives your vehicle, he does everything that an employee would do, but you're paying him 1099 subcontractor, that is a violation of what a true subcontractor is. But this hits every federal guideline and certainly Georgia guideline for being a subcontractor.
You think they'll win?
Uber and Lyft? I would hope so.
No, I don't. I guess I was asking if you thought the government was going to win because of that court out there, but I forget which.
Oh, the Ninth Circus.
Yeah. Yes.
And they may initially look. It's not up to Uber and Lyft to handle unemployment. You either have a gig, you either have a ride or you don't. Uber and Lyft aren't the ones deciding that you're going to work. They aren't the ones deciding that whether or not to pay you. If the work's not there, again, true subcontractor, the guy that hangs sheetrock and works for 5 different contractors, when the sheetrock work dries up, then you go home. If you're not covered by any unemployment or you don't have any savings, that's on you. You're a subcontractor. You're self-employed in that sense. This is no different from being a sheetrocker or a painter or anybody else who works for themselves and works for several different contractors. And when the work dries up, your money dries up. That's just
their
That's
argument.
just a fact of life.
Did you read the ABC test for
No.
the state? So the states, when I guess it says that it according to the article, it says that the law came or was implemented to codify a state Supreme Court decision, which really means nothing in the state of California because talk about activist judges. But it's 3-part test known as the ABC test, requires a worker to be free from control or direction in offering their services, be doing outside work outside of the normal scope of business of the entity hiring them, and be customarily engaged in the kind of work they're being hired to do if they're going to be an independent contractor. So they're arguing that they're not independent contractors because they're not free from control or direction in offering their services. But I would argue that they absolutely are, because when you want to be a driver, you literally log onto your app and say that you're available, and when you want to leave, you leave.
Right.
And they're
You're
not saying
being
that
paid
you
by
have
the
to.
hour.
Yeah, they're saying you have to have all 3. Like, it's not one; you've got to have all 3. And if you're missing one, you are not. You're supposed to have certain benefits and protections, which is ridiculous.
Look, you want to see DUIs go up? You want to see costs go up? You want to see Uber and Lyft leave California, because that's how you get it. And I think Uber was founded in San Francisco. But you want to see them pull out of California? That's how you get it. That's how you get rideshare services to leave, and as a consequence, you will see DUIs go up. That they can't afford to give drivers, and I'm guessing across California, 100,000 drivers benefits. People who drive 10 hours a week, it hits every note for being a subcontractor. They're not under control. They're not told on Tuesday you will clock in. It is
right.
You sign in, and in fact, not only when you sign in, you don't have to take they don't tell you, well, you must go take up Dave Roberts in Dallas, and you must take him to Ackworth. No, they can look at their app and go, I don't want to go all the way there to pick somebody up, and keep scrolling and pick the jobs they want. So it's going to be a huge waste of money for both the municipalities and for these rideshare companies.
Well, and what does be doing work outside the normal scope of business of the entity hiring them even mean? First of all, I don't even know what that means. Like, when in regard to Uber, so you want them to, because they're not hired, they're literally not hired, but you want them to, like, deliver groceries, and then they're an outside this normal scope of business. That doesn't.
Well, and I would
sense.
argue that Uber and Lyft are technology companies, not transportation companies.
Sure, but you get what I'm saying. Like, what is the other scope of business? How do you do you prove you're not doing something that you're not doing?
Well, it's very typical, very California way of making it clear as mud, so that they can manipulate the verbiage to support anything they want. Look, government has never liked ride sharing services.
Oh, I know. Because the taxi medallions and the revenue and everything. And they've been behind the curve the entire time trying to catch up, figure out how to make money off of it.
And something else. Government likes when people violate the law because they make money. The DUI schools make money. When you see a steep decline in something that's such a moneymaker, DUI costs what, $10,000?
Mm-hmm.
It is a moneymaker for the government. And we saw with such draconian penalties, and with the rideshare, we see the DUI rates going down. So how does government respond? They come up with the super speeder law. We've got to get money from somewhere. When we did away with Georgia 400 toll booth, government freaks out. They create these what they wanted to be HOV lanes because we're going to help the environment. They said, screw it. If you pay us per mile, you can use the HOV lane. And that's where we get the pay lanes, because government never does with less. So they've had it out for Uber and Lyft for a while. This just happens to be a good enough excuse. So Georgia extended the judicial emergency through June 12th, and Jessica is pissed.
I am so mad. It was supposed to expire on May 13th, and they announced, last Monday or Tuesday, that they were going to extend it another 30 days, which means that the courts are closed entirely to the public. They're only doing the bare minimum to keep operations and doing hearings for things like when you have your right to first appearance and bond hearings and pressing matters. They're not doing any juries, which we'll talk about why that's a problem. They're not convening any juries. They're not impaneling them. They're not scheduling them. The clerk's offices are closed. And that's what's really my rub for a number of reasons. One, because every story I have is contingent upon getting into the clerk's office and being able to do research, because the information is not available online. And the information that is available online, you have to pay 50 cents a page to look at, not even print or download, but to just view it. So when you're talking about someone who's doing like long form stories like I do, I mean, it gets very expensive. So you have to go to the courthouse. But on top of that, like, we're going to talk about this later, but there's a case, a lawsuit filed against the Georgia State Patrol. And unless a trooper or an attorney leaks that to you, you can't see the lawsuit. You can't get a copy of it. You can't access it. We have we can't get anything. You're relying on people who are suing or doing things to contact and release the lawsuits or the documents in their entirety. And then the third thing is it's 3 days after the primary, or 4, depending on when they're actually going to open. So all of these people who are running and all these open seats and candidates, we can't even go to the courthouse and see if they've been sued for fraud or charged for, killing someone and leaving them in a ditch. I don't know. There's all kinds of things that we can't even do research on our candidates, which is a traditional component to the elections process, is seeing if they've been in any type of criminal or civil trouble. All because, one, our state never prioritized technology, and so we weren't ready for this. And 2, because they don't think that the clerks who already sit behind a glass window can allow me to sit at a computer and then Lysol it when I leave. Give me a damn break. Open the freaking courthouses, or give back your salaries for the clerks and the judges and everyone else who sits up there all day long and is currently at home doing nothing. Give us your salaries and put the money towards hurrying up and scanning some stuff and putting it on the damn internet.
Carrier permits?
Oh, yes.
We talked about last week.
Yes. Go on for that.
Yeah, another month. And look, we covered it pretty well last week, but you have a right to a speedy trial.
And every court in this state is already backlogged. I don't care where you live. There's already a backlog unless you're talking about a traffic ticket. And even, I would argue that 60 days to have your first appearance for a traffic ticket can be too long. Like, Divorces, people can't get divorced. You can't get child support things in place, parenting plans, custody agreements. All of that's on hold.
Right.
And to the permit thing, because I saw an article, and I put on the outline for us, but in Houston County, which is 150,000 people, so it's really not that big of a county. I mean, it's decent size, but they already have 400 pending applications from basically almost 2 months. Think about the bigger counties or the super pro-Second Amendment counties. Because you had, I'm sorry, that's the last time I'm going to interrupt you, I swear, but like you had all these people go out and buy guns and ammo at the beginning of this, and sure, a lot of them were already lawful gun owners who had their permits anyway, but you had all these people rush out to buy guns, and then now they can't even get a permit, and you can't carry without a permit, but we're not going to issue permits? Okay, sure, it's not an infringement. Whatever.
And Georgia Carry has now filed 4 lawsuits in Georgia.
But they lost the first one. Did we talk about that?
No.
Well, Kemp's lawyers, which is Chris Carr, which obviously not actually him because he doesn't know how to go to the courtroom, but the state's attorneys argued that it didn't apply, like the emergency clauses didn't apply, and that the guns were not. Their argument was basically that we have this law on the books that you have to have a permit to carry a gun, but we don't really enforce it, so we don't need to suspend that rule in an emergency when we're not issuing them. Okay, well, I'll be sure to cite that when you arrest my neighbor for, having a gun on that person without a permit. And when they have all the legal fees that they have to fork out, and they have all, everything that they have to do to defend themselves against something that is already, again, an infringement, you want me to cite the fact that you don't usually enforce it as the justification for not suspending something that is overly burdensome?
And it wouldn't affect me. Besides, I have a permit, but it's going to affect this person who went out and bought what they could afford and kept it on them. And the person who is lower income that gets arrested, who can't afford to get an attorney to fight it, can't afford to go to trial. I mean, most more sophisticated people, officer, can I search you? No, get a warrant. But a lot of people in the inner city who are already scared of the police and stuff like that, they're going to be the ones that get popped for this. They're not going to have the means to fight it. And that's of course there's an economic disparity in the law anyway, that you get the justice you can afford, but and I've argued that permits themselves are tantamount to a poll tax, because you should never have to pay the government to exercise a right. But that's getting off on a hog trail. But yeah, the argument is ridiculous. Well, we don't really enforce it, so it's not really illegal. Oh, really? Because that's one of those charges that they throw on top. Is we got you for this, and carrying a firearm without a permit.
Open the freaking courthouses.
If I can go and get a burrito bowl at Moe's, I can go and get a carry permit. And if you really want to keep the clerks safe up in probate court, do away with the fingerprint requirement. Now you don't have to touch me at all, and you can sit behind the glass and do it. Because I don't know what the fingerprint does for you. So, these are our opinions, and not necessarily those of All on Georgia, and certainly not those of any All on Georgia reporter not offering commentary on this show. Lieutenant Governor Duncan wants us to focus on a good deed to forget the misdeeds. Oh.
Obviously, that was my commentary. So we know that budget cuts are coming because the state's spending at least $100 million on the COVID pandemic, and we're going to get lots of money reimbursed from the federal government, but you're robbing Peter to pay Paul at that point. But the governor's, actually, I don't know if it was the governor's office or the budget office in the legislature, but they've suggested state agencies need to cut their budgets by 14% and be prepared for the worst of the worst. So Jeff Duncan takes to, I guess, Twitter or something and said, as we work through the budget process ahead of us, it will be necessary for everyone to make sacrifices, and I will do my part to take a cut as well. So he's going to forego 14% of his $91,609 salary that he gets for a part-time gig beginning July 1. And we're supposed to be impressed, I guess. He's giving up $12,000 or almost $13,000, which I think this is a nice gesture, but give it all up.
Well, it's a nice gesture, and exactly what that is it's a gesture. There's only two ways to get over a budget shortfall: raise taxes or cut budgets. We constitutionally cannot have an unbalanced budget in Georgia. We just can't. We're not allowed to. We can't run deficits.
Right.
We're not the federal government. We don't print money. We can't run a deficit. So these folks that are hollering, and I know every department's hollering, well, we already don't have enough. Well, find yourself a red pen. Find the fat. How about letting state vehicles last another couple years instead of replacing them? How about we don't necessarily replace some folks? How about we not build the business court? We can find places, we can delay projects, and not necessarily cancel them, but delay them until the state gets healthy again, whether it's 21 or it's 2022. There are reasonable things that can be done without just saying, I'm going to slash everybody's salary by 14%. And I would argue salaries are probably a relatively small part of the state budget.
Right, but aren't there like 8 or 9 people in Kemp's office who make over $100,000?
Yeah, and you know what? And you can do without some of that staff. Look, every other facet of life is seeing layoffs and furloughs and hours cut. I mean, it's fair enough for it to be in government. And you can only get to big numbers by addressing little numbers. And the argument from everybody at the state is, well, $100,000 is nothing when you compare it to the budget of the state. Yeah, but it's everywhere across the board. And it's even going to come down to the Georgia National Guard. They may do less training. They may have to spend less time on the range. The stuff that comes out of the budget for that. Obviously, deployments go federal. At that point, the National Guard belongs to the federal government, but that budget's going to have to be cut. Hartsfield is obviously got to cut its budget. I saw somewhere where we're at a third of the air travel right now. You go into Hartsfield, I mean, it's an empty hall. It's like being there at midnight. They're gonna have the funding for that. It's gonna have to be cut. The city's gonna have to cut funding. Out here, I've got a dumbass running for re-election that says that we need to build a park over what used to be a landfill. So how about we back off spending money on that stuff right now? How about we figure out where we are budgetarily before you start spending more money? He's so worried about buying votes that he's willing to run the county into financial ruin. So this is at every level, well, except for federal. They'll just continue to print money. And whether it's the Department of Education, cut the budgets, furlough some teachers. Everybody's going to have to hurt. And I don't think you or I are unscathed by this in our income either.
Right.
I certainly will see a financial impact. Now, is it going to put Dr. Cool out of business? No. Now, it may delay some expanding plans, but it's not going to put Dr. Cool out of business. So there's no, I mean, when we say we're all in this together, guess what? That means you two teachers. That means you two county road workers. That means you two state DOT. That means you two Georgia Highway Patrol. I mean, it's gonna. All of us have to deal with this. So, speaking of Georgia Highway Patrol and their budget, it's being sued.
This is an interesting one that has a couple components to it. Basically, there's a trooper, or a former trooper, who is suing the Georgia State Patrol because he argues that he worked 60 hours a week while he was in training, which is trooper school, and then, the time period after that, but only got paid for 40 hours a week, and that he is owed $11,957 in back pay. And there's apparently hundreds of others of people who have signed on to this class action lawsuit for about $5 million. Now, the reason that this is entertaining, so there's two components. Obviously, one, like we'll talk about, are you working when you're training and when you're going to school? But the second component is this guy graduated from trooper school in January 2019, and he was among the 30 troopers who were canned about a month and a half ago, or 2 months ago, just before the pandemic, for cheating on the exam, allegedly. So he went all of this time and didn't complain about the overtime, but then when he got canned, he filed a lawsuit. So, and I understand that it's not popular to sue your current employer, and even though you're protected under the law, that it can make life very difficult. I recognize all of that, but it's certainly, the optics are not good that somebody who was fired for cheating is suing the state over back pay, and that it's over a year later. So
that is always what happens when you can somebody.
Right.
Someone's first reaction after being canned is always, well, I'm going to sue my employer. And most of the time, they go running to somebody who does employment law, and they're like, no, the best you can get by suing them is getting your job back. As far as the argument is about doing 60 hours a week while in training, I don't have a whole lot of sympathy. I mean, I certainly didn't clock in and clock out when I was going through basic training.
Mm-hmm.
And I could tell you I was making a whole hell of a lot less than troopers are, even in training. I think that's sweet, $800 a month. But it's what you sign up for. And at any point during the training, when you get your paycheck and it said 40 hours and you know that you were doing stuff for 60, you could have gone, you know what, screw this, and left. At any point during the training. I mean, they're not under contract, they're not enlisted, they're not commissioned. You make the agreement. This is what we're going to do. I think it's absurd. I think it's sour grapes on behalf of these guys that got canned. And that's if it gets brought up in court, and I don't know if it will or not, and whether it's admissible, but I don't think a jury in a civil trial is going to be all that enthusiastic about giving money to cheaters.
Okay, but at the same time, what happens, because it's a class action, which was a brilliant move. There's hundreds of people in this lawsuit, and only 30 of them were canned. So can you separate them, or does everyone get dismissed, or does everyone get their money?
It would change, the lawsuit would change the policy forever. Going forward, they would either training time would be cut to 40 hours a week, or the pay would be changed going forward. And I think it would open up a can of worms for every trooper that went through trooper school to then sue for lost wages.
Well, and it sounds like that's somewhat is what is happening.
Right. That every one of them went, yeah, you know what? Yeah, I want my 10 grand too. Yeah. Even people who are happily serving in that role be like, hey, wait a minute, I could use $11,957.12 too. And here's the thing, he's not going to get it. Even if they win, he won't get it. No one wins a class action lawsuit besides the lawyers.
True.
Well, what end up happening is the lawyers will make all the money. He'll get a check for $1,000, get an apology from the department, and going forward, the policy will be. I mean, have you ever been in a class action lawsuit?
No.
They send you something and you sign on to it, and then you get a check for 12
Sure.
cents. Yeah, the lawyers make all the money in this. This is not. I certainly wouldn't sign on to it if I was still serving as a trooper. Not that I ever was, but if I were serving as a trooper, I certainly would not sign on to this. I mean, you put a target on your back. I know you can't retaliate, but yeah, you kind of do.
Yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what will happen because, like you said, I mean, they're not going to get any money, but I'm interested to see if they distinguish between, because some of those people aren't employed there. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're no longer employed if you actually were entitled to back pay.
Right. No, I mean, wage theft is a big thing. It was 20 years ago or so when they started reclassifying people as hourly employees because large corporations were using the exempt classification to get more hours out of people for without paying overtime. So you would make somebody in the banking world, they would take people who were bank officers and say, okay, well, you're an officer now, you're exempt. And then the federal government came in and kind of smacked them down and said, no. You have to have a leadership or specialized role. So there are specific laws of who's exempt and who's hourly. And if these guys are considered hourly, I mean, the lawyers are going to get paid. Right in the middle of a budget shortfall. Why don't you cut that payment by 14%? And I know we have insurance, liability, and all that stuff to cover lawsuits and things like that. It's more complicated than just saying it's going to cost $5 million. But I would guess this will never see a courtroom. It'll be settled. They'll get an apology. The policy will be changed going forward, and the lawyers will make money. Yeah, I heard that theory a long time ago about divorce. The reason a lot of times the divorce gets so contentious because the lawyers they want to make money. They want to rack up the hours. That it's an industry. The divorce industry it makes many a lawyer rich and many a couple poor. So Jessica, do you have any closing thoughts?
Sort of. It kind of goes back to where we started, which I didn't realize that I was doing that, but it was back on the coverage of Kemp and just the way that things are, and I don't know. I'm a huge proponent of not editorializing unless you're proclaiming that it's an editorial or a column or an opinion or whatever. And The Root put out an article last week, and it says, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, I totally messed up reopening the state. Growing outbreak is stressing resources. Because right now, Northeast Georgia, I think, is a new hotspot. Whatever, everyone declares hotspot something different. But listen to this first paragraph. This is supposed to be a fact-based article about what's happening with Georgia reopening. Notorious thief and Governor Brian Kemp, who successfully stole the governorship from America's darling and possibly Joe Biden's vice presidential pick, Stacey Abrams, warned Tuesday that he might be dumber than the current president. I love the First Amendment, and I say some outrageous things on Facebook and on social media, but I think that in the times of what we're facing, there is a moral and ethical obligation to not write like that. I just do. I understand that people want to say fake news and all that. This is not fake news. This is in an article on a website that people think provides them news. And I can't even fathom writing an article like that and opening it like that. It's embarrassing.
Look, if you want to put that on your Twitter,
right,
that's fine. I mean, it's not the most witty thing I've ever read, but if you want to put that on your Twitter, it's fine. But when you masquerade it as a news story and you start off with asserting that Kemp is a thief, a notorious thief, and that he stole the election, and to call Stacey Abrams America's sweetheart, I mean, even if you put opinion on it, it's not fit to print.
No, it's when you write an article, like, and I guess people just aren't as worried about their opinions. I mean, I don't, it's really hard to articulate what I'm trying to say, because when I write an opinion, I don't cater it to not tick people off. I know that what I say ticks people off, and there's nothing that I wouldn't stand behind. It's not that. It's that I want it to be something that, just because it's my opinion, I still want to be proud of it. Like, I want people to say, wow, like, I might not agree with that, but that really made me think, or I can understand why she believes that. I don't understand anything about that first paragraph other than that you are emotional and irrational and you can't articulate your thoughts reasonably.
You started with the conclusion, you worked your way back to it. The writer didn't think that it was appropriate to open the state. Writer also is one of those people that's going to be critical of Kemp regardless of what the facts are. If he didn't open the state, they'd be critical of Kemp. It doesn't matter. The first paragraph invalidates anything in the rest of the article. So even if the rest of the article was nothing but fact, it doesn't matter. You can't take it for fact because of the opening. You know, even if the opening said, "I believe that," you know, put it. I believe that Kemp stole the race from Stacey Abrams. At least that says in it, it's my belief. This is my opinion. I still think it's classless and has no place in journalism, but at least, you know, let's label opinion.
Yeah.
And so somewhere out there, people are quoting that article.
Yeah, and sharing it as fact, exactly. And that's what I get so frustrated about the fake news for. Fake news isn't something you disagree with, so that's not fake news. That is borderline. I mean, that's manipulation and indoctrination. That's what the point is to. I don't respect it, and it just really bothers me. And I don't normally read the Root, but I do read a lot of Georgia news and skim headlines, and I could see the preview of the first paragraph, and it was really something.
Yeah. Congratulations. Everything following that is invalid. My closing thought is the Ahmaud Arbery case will go to grand jury after a statewide judicial emergency ends in June, as we just covered. This is the Glenn County case where a 25-year-old man was jogging in a neighborhood when a confrontation with two men, one being a former investigator for the district attorney's office, resulted in the shooting death of Arbery. We're going to cover the story better next week. Every day we seem to get more information on it. The video came out last week, and that really is what kind of put charge in the case and highlighted what actually happened. As Jessica and I were talking before the show, this was covered locally in Southeast Georgia, but really certainly did not have the press that it's got now, where it's on national news, and it's the video is fairly damning. But we're gonna look for a guest or two next week to really get into the nuts and bolts of what happened.
Yes, and not speculate. Not we won't. Maybe our guests will. I don't know, but just give this story some well-deserved coverage, not necessarily just, hey, this happened and moving on. So
yeah, and that's certainly not the intent of putting it here, but as a cliffhanger, next week when we have time to digest, and as the more of the story comes out, we can get some folks with different perspectives on the story come in and talk about it instead of just us talking about it. So we're certainly not glazing over it, but thank you very much for listening. For Jessica Szilagyi, for the audio magician Eric Cumby, I'm Dave Roberts. Have a great week.